Text on a pink and blue gradient background, by Pride UK's Bi-Fi Festival. An animated Wi-Fi symbol beams above the logo. Title, by BAME Empowerment panel featuring Sharan Dhaliwal, Chair, Angee the Diva, Rania Vamvaka, Vaneet Mehta, Siqi Chong.
Hi everyone, welcome to Bi Pride Bi-Fi Festival 2020. I practiced that quite a few times. I'm going to introduce myself first before I get the other panelists to introduce themselves. So my name is Sharan Dhaliwal. I'm the editor of Roti magazine, which is a platform for creative South Asians to talk about things like racism, mental health and sexuality. I'm also the director of Middlesex Pride, and I created an event called Oh Queer Cupid, which is a queer speed dating event in London. And I'm also a journalist and throw in a couple of other things. I'm just super excited right now to be hosting this panel with all these amazing people. But I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. So Vaneet, do you want to go first?
So hi everyone, my name is Vaneet. My pronouns are he, him. I was born and raised in South and West London. I'm an Indian bisexual person. I work as a programmer, but in my spare time I do a lot of work within the LGBTQ+ community. So I volunteer for Middlesex Pride. I also volunteer for Rainbow Films, and I'm a writer, so some of my writing has appeared in Metro, in LGBT Outlife, GMFA, and I'm currently writing a book on bisexual men.
Thank you. Rania, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Rania, my pronouns are she, her. I was born in Athens to a mixed family from Turkey and Egypt, and I identify as bisexual. I have been in the UK since 2011. I look much younger, I know. And I am a doctoral researcher at Cardiff University. I research queer asylum policy, basically. And I'm also the education officer for Glitter Cambry. And Glitter is a BAME LGBTQ grassroots in Cardiff, Wales.
Thank you. Angie, do you want to go next?
Okay, I just had to run across the street because I'm actually outside. I am here in Vietnam, and it's like 12:30 right now, 12:40, midnight 40 here. And the comedians are still in the bar behind me, and they're very, very loud, so I had to run across the street. But I'm Angie. I go by Angie the Diva in Saigon here. My pronouns are she, her. And I identify as pansexual, and I'm a comedian and an event planner here. I do a lot of events in the community, and a lot of events with the drag community here as well. I guess like one of the biggest things about what I do here that's really important for me is representation. There are a lot of Black people here. There definitely are not a lot of Black American women. And there are not a lot of, well, actually there's a pretty good queer community here, I'm not gonna lie. But I basically run the comedy scene in Vietnam. And so that's really big for someone who looks like me.
Siqi, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Siqi. I was born and raised in Malaysia, and I currently work in EY, and I'm the UKI bi lead. So I help EY and its networks advance bi inclusion and build bi communities across the offices across the world, and ensures a sufficient representation of bi people as well. We also collaborate with charities and our clients and learn from each other to ensure like best practices and learn from each other, because it's a progress to improve all these corporate spaces to make it bi inclusive. And wow, I sound very corporate compared to everyone else.
I love it. Good preparation. So yeah, I'm really excited about this panel and the discussion we're going to have around BAME empowerment, particularly about, you know, our individual experiences about being people of color from our individual backgrounds, and how that's affected us in the way that we exist in this world as bisexual people and just as just people of color. So I wanted to start this panel with a question that's quite uplifting. Can each of you tell me either a moment in bisexual history or a person in the past or now who empowers you, and they could be dead or alive? Rania, I'll ask you first.
That's quite a heavy question to just like begin with, isn't it? It's like, I'm gonna give it light. Thanks. One person specifically that kind of like empowered me to be who I am and being comfortable in my kind of bisexuality is cliche, but is Frida Kahlo. Because I didn't have any representation growing up in the media. And I kind of turned to like art and art history to kind of discover more about myself. So when I stumbled across Frida Kahlo, I was really amazed. That she was living her life as an openly bisexual woman, embracing the fluidity of our sexuality, wearing men's clothes. So yeah, she was a big inspiration and empowering kind of figure in my life. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think Frida Kahlo is for quite a few people actually. Like, she's such an important person, an important part of history as well. So thank you, Rania. We'll get Vaneet, go on.
I guess when you talk about past figures, I think we have to remember that a lot of there were plenty of people that were the forefronts of the queer liberation movement who were bisexual. I think Brenda Howard was bisexual, so I think it's important to remember that. One of my favorite icons is Freddie Mercury, because just look at him, like South Asian, queer, unashamed. But I think one of my favorite sort of moments is seeing a lot of people working in the scene at the moment who are bisexual and at the forefront. So, you know, yourself, Sharon, creating Middlesex Bi. You have people like Chloe and Anik who are working in Black Pride, and Ramel working in Pride in London. And there's so many other people, like everyone on this call, for example, just how we're pushing boundaries and we're really making sure that we're visible.
Absolutely, great answer. I like it when I'm part of the answer, so everyone remember that. Thank you. Angie, do you want to go next?
I guess the first person that really inspired me to live more openly and just be more accepting of who I was Audre Lorde. And I discovered her writings when I was in university. And it was the first time that I felt like someone was speaking to my feelings and my experience and who looked like me. So that was really big for me. Yeah, Audre Lorde.
It's a great answer, yeah, Audre Lorde. And I think a lot of people forget about like certain like writers and stuff as well. Like, people look a lot to, you know, I guess you look at what's happening at the moment, and when you look back and you see like, you know, the history and of writers and stuff, you find like there's so much more out there. Siqi, do you have any yourself?
So basically, I was actually going to talk about Freddie Mercury as well, because I feel like with people like Freddie Mercury and David Bowie, like, you see a lot of straight people go like herald them as like legends in their field, and they rightly are. But so many people forget that they're queer, they're bi. It's just another example of bi erasure. But since Vaneet already talked about Freddie Mercury, I think a really empowering moment for me was actually last year at Pride itself and Bi Pride. It's a shame we can't celebrate it this year, but I think last year at Pride, it was the first time ever I'd seen lots of bi flags around. It was the most bi flags I'd ever seen, and I've been volunteering at Pride for the last 5 years, and it was fantastic. I kind of wanted to cry at that moment, just seeing these huge bi flags everywhere. It makes you feel like you're accepted, you're part of something in a space that's like, oh, you always have the rainbow, you don't really see the pink, purple, and blue. And then at Bi Pride as well in September, because I'd never seen so many bi people in one space together, and there was so much love, and there was so much, I guess, appreciation. It was such a sense of like community and solidarity with each other, and that was really empowering for me.
Definitely. And I noticed that Bi Pride last year, there was so much respect as well, and so much understanding, and just it was so welcoming. And it is lovely that we can get together and do this, but I cannot wait to have another Bi Pride gathering where we can all get together and just hang out. Like, Can't wait for that. I wanted to talk about mental health. I think one of the biggest things that happens when you talk about bisexuality is people end up bringing up mental health. When you look at statistics, you see that there's a high rate of bisexual people that have mental health issues. And when you look at bisexual women and also lesbians as well, there tends to be a high risk of harm as well. And so I wanted to kind of discuss that, like, especially when we're coming on the terms of empowerment, you know, when you want to empower people or empower yourself, when you have mental health issues, and it's a well-known statistic as well that you may suffer from it. Why do you think that exists for bisexual people? Why do you think that that's something that we have to, like, deal with, and there's an expectation as well to have mental health issues, I guess, as well? Siqi, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to take that one. I think a big part of the mental health issues borne by bisexual people is because of that lack of community and like lack of visibility so far, and because you don't feel like I guess speaking from my experience, you don't feel like you're straight enough, or you don't feel like you're gay enough, and neither community fully welcomes you. And as bi people, so many people I know that are like, that identify as gay or identify as straight have also experienced attraction to multiple genders. But because it's easier in a sense, a lot of them will claim to be gay to fit into that community, or claim to be a lesbian to fit into that community. And I mean, I've experienced things like that myself, where I've gone on dates, and like this woman has told me, oh, it's okay, you're not fully out yet. So it's hard when you have to constantly justify your existence and constantly justify who you are and your sexuality to other people. I was at a panel a few months ago for like young graduates in law, and it was the first time they had a panel about like bisexuality. After the panel, so many like these students came up to me and asked and told me like, oh, I've only dated one man but 8 women. Do I still count? And I can't tell you the number of times being at panels where people ask me, do I count? Because it's not quite 50-50, or they've never had a relationship. And I feel like this thing of having to, especially for women, where people often dismiss you, having to justify who you are and how you exist is exhausting, and leads to that kind of disconnect between who you want to be and who you can be in reality.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It really is this disconnect, isn't it? This massive disconnect that we have, and kind of a displacement as well. I agree. Angie, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I fully agree with Siqi that there, especially for someone like me, like I have 2 kids and I was married, and so to a lot of the world I just seem passable. They don't even question. And so I guess possibly the opposite for me, versus needing to constantly identify with a group, I feel the need to constantly identify as a type of queer. Like I feel, you know, honestly, a lot of times like, hey, I'm queer too. And to even have a voice in those spaces. And I think the other side of it is that, especially for people of color, mental health is not a thing. It's not acceptable. It's not something that we talk about. I know for a lot of communities of color. And so you may feel depressed or down or sad or whatever, but it's not something that you are able or willing or allowed to talk about. And so the constant silencing that we have to experience, and a lot of silencing ourselves, we talk ourselves out of the need for mental health because of the stigma, because you know you don't want other people to judge you or label you, or because you think that those labels somehow put you on the outside, that you don't want to accept that about yourself. So yeah, I think access and acceptance of the need for mental health is also a really big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. Like coming from communities of color, like you said, like there's so many stigmas that's put on it that even if you say to someone that's in your family, like, you know, I feel a bit down, they're just like, shut up, like get over it kind of thing, you know. And I think that's so important, to something to highlight, definitely. Rania, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I grew up in a family where therapy was for the crazies. It was not a thing. I don't think I've ever had an honest discussion with my family about my therapy and what I've gained from my therapy, because I know they will brand me as like a crazy. And I know that's not the, it's not who I want to be in their eyes, if that makes sense. But definitely, being a bisexual woman has kind of added a layer of complication. During my therapy, I had to kind of tackle my own limitations that I kind of put on myself as to why I don't come out to everyone all the time. And why don't I kind of always know the answer when it comes to like bi problems. So there is definitely a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves when we say, let's be visible, let's do all these fantastic things. They are fantastic and we need to be visible, but it needs to be balanced. And as people of color, we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be leading the way, to kind of carving that path. And that we need to be more gentle on ourselves, is what I'm trying to say.
No, that's so true. Being gentle to yourself, like that's so true, because a lot of the stuff that we create or that we want to see happen, it needs to be carved, like you said, by ourselves, because everything else that's held in power in queer structures tend to be by white men, and that doesn't relate to us. And so the kind of heartache and the kind of like emotions that you go through, it's a struggle. You're 100% right there.
I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday, that it has been quite a struggle for me living in Wales to find a therapist that is queer and a person of color at the same time. And it is very strange that I haven't come across anyone like that in Wales. It needs to be addressed, because there is a huge BAME population, POC population in Wales, and not having therapists that understand who we are, our issues, is very, very problematic.
I agree, there is that thing as well. And there's a couple of networks out there that are for Black, Asian, minority ethnic people, but whether they have a database of queer therapists as well within that is I'm unsure about. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Vaneet, I know you talk a lot about mental health within like bisexuality. What do you have to say about it?
I think it's really just echoing what everyone else has said. I think it is that idea of when you exist in multiple different, when you have multiple different identities and trying to put them all together and then exist in a space where you can, all of that can be accepted at once, is really hard, right? If you're a person of color, you can normally go into your cultural community and feel safe. But if you're a queer person of color, is that space always safe, right? If you are a queer person of color and you go to LGBT plus spaces when they're so white dominated, not really. And then you go deeper and you go, well, someone who is a gay person of color may be able to go to a queer POC night. But if you're a bi person, will you always be accepted there? Or will they see you with your different sex partner and say, it's the straights, and try and exclude you? It becomes really difficult to find a space where you can just embrace your whole identity. And of course, when you can't connect with a community and you feel like you're ostracized and rejected from everywhere, naturally your mental health is going to take a toll, right? I mean, it's the natural conclusion.
Absolutely. That is something like the bearing of that pressure. Like, there's only so much our bodies and our minds can take, and that is a lot of pressure. So I want to become topical right now. So stop laughing at me. So with everything that's happening in the world right now, like from everything we can see with the protests that are happening, we already know as people of color, but we don't know to the extent of Black people as like Asian or minority ethnic people about what's happening at the moment, but we are aware of white supremacy. So I wanted to discuss the idea of how white supremacy has affected us as people of color, but also within the queer community as well. So whether, like, you know, being bisexual and a person of color would mean that you, I guess, would experience more violence from white supremacy, or would you experience less? Like, what are your experiences with that, or what are your thoughts on that? Let's get Angie to go first.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. And I think, am I the only American on the panel? So it is tragic what is happening right now, but it's even more tragic that this is not new. This is something that Black people have been dealing with in the United States for generations, for hundreds of years. And it's becoming public now, which is even more devastating because I guess in some ways, before it was done in a way that wasn't exposed to the world. And now the whole entire world is seeing this play out and seeing the injustices that are happening to Black people in the whole entire country. And for America to be the greatest whatever, and to have this glaring injustice happening and nothing being done about it is the saddest thing. It's the saddest thing that I can imagine going on right. As a Black American abroad, it's also weird because a lot of people are saying that we left and we're not a part of the struggle, and you know, we don't have a say as to what is happening right now. And though I experience much like nil racism here, I still feel the pain and the struggle of what is happening in my DNA. And so as a queer person of color as well, you have to sort of pick which oppression you want today. In the United States, you have to choose, how will I be oppressed today? How will I invite knowingly, walking down the street in my body, in my space, that someone is going to say or do something to harm my person? How, you know, which oppression do I want today? Which one is less? And in some areas, you know, like the other panelists were talking about earlier, in some areas, you're not accepted because you're not queer enough, you're not gay enough, you're not straight enough. But as a Black American, you're also too Black, or colorism is a huge thing. So, and in a lot of spaces, I'm not Black enough because I speak properly, quote unquote, because of the experiences that I've had, because I live abroad. I'm not Black enough. It's devastating to not, as a Black queer American, in a lot of instances, to have no place. I don't belong anywhere. Honestly, I don't know how you deal with that. Like, I deal with it in occupying my space unapologetically. I deal with it by teaching my children that whatever they decide to be, or whoever they decide to express themselves, that they are welcome, at least in my home. And in the homes of many people that I know. I try to surround my kids with people that represent many different backgrounds and identities. And there is hope for that generation. They have a different vocabulary. They have a different understanding of acceptance beyond just not talking about how you're different. They have an idea of real acceptance, that you are absolutely okay in whatever space you occupy. But yeah, I mean, the United States right now, it's not great, and it hasn't. The fact of the matter is, it hasn't been great forever. Period. Full stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, your sentiments just are echoed throughout everything that we're seeing and we're witnessing. And it's, I guess it's that kind of, like, by you saying, like, you know, this is something that's been happening forever. It's that kind of, that's what white supremacy is. That's what these power structures are built on. These things have been happening forever. And so as a person of color existing in this world, and then particularly as a Black person that's existing in this world, that you will feel the pressures of it. even more so, but opening this world up to your children and like having that further discussion. And yeah, I mean, I think that's so important to like, even though like, you know that there is a struggle and there will be a struggle, as long as they're aware of so much about the world and about people and about cultures and communities, then life would, hopefully, we can only pray, be easier for next generations. Yeah, definitely.
It's easier in some ways, but in other ways it's still like, wow, because my kids are very aware of the fact that my son is in danger if he walks down the street. They have to understand the nuances of what it means to be Black in America, and that is, and it, they're 10 and 12, and they've known since they were really young that you can't do certain things because of how you look. You can't be in certain places because it's dangerous for you. And it's heavy when you first have to have that conversation with them, that kid didn't want to play with you, or that parent didn't want you around because of how you look. And you just have to accept it. That's the way it is. Sorry, kid. But yeah, there is, my daughter, she's 12, and she knows what it is to be non-binary, and she knows what it is to be, the outer skirts of the sexuality and gender spectrums. She knows what all of those things mean, and she says it so matter-of-factly. It's just like, oh, okay, that's just how it is, and that gives me hope. That is, that's something that, it's not just her. I didn't explicitly tell her that, and I know she's having those conversations with her friends, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Angie. Vaneet, did you have anything to say on that?
It's not just, when we talk about sort of queerness, and we talk about being queer people of colour, it's not just how the white supremacy is, but also the patriarchy and the way the patriarchy dominates us. And someone once coined this term to me, which I really love, is when we talk about queer spaces, we also need to talk about the gaytriarchy, and how, you have your own tiers within our spaces. And like I was saying before, our spaces are often so dominated by cis, white, gay men. That is what our spaces are dominated by. And so all of the things that you see in everyday society are just replicated in our own spaces. I think one person once said to me, it's like, it's exactly what society is, but it's just rose-tinted glasses on top of it. It's just covered by queerness. It's just got a little sprinkle of sugar, but it's still the same thing. It's still the same thing being replicated. And I think it's really important that we need to tackle the way our spaces are not just dominated by cis white gay men, but also massively owned by cis white gay men. Like, a lot of our bars and clubs and spaces are owned by these people, and so, obviously there's going to be that inherent bias in some of these spaces.
Siqi, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Angie and Vaneet has said. Like, everywhere we go in our experience, we can see that like the white supremacy and patriarchy just saturates all space, be it like community spaces or policies. It's almost like these spaces and policies are just not designed with us in mind. It's designed for the white man. It's I think linked to the whole idea of pride and LGBTQ plus solidarity being commercialized. It's being repackaged into something that's marketable to an audience that already is comfortable with the white supremacy. And like, I guess from an Asian kind of perspective, I don't want to invalidate any of the more intense or painful experiences others might have faced. Being, we always, I guess, get seen as the model minority, but it's almost like, especially with coronavirus, you realize your being accepted comes at a price. You need to still be docile. You need to be like educated, but not too educated. You need to come with money, but you can't come with too much money. And it's conditional on you being satisfying everything that upholds these structures that you're accepted. And you see with coronavirus coming now, everyone suddenly started turning against like like East Asian people and like Asian Americans, and it's just really obvious that white supremacy just exists in all these spaces.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. No, that's so true. Like it's about like, no matter where we are, what's happening in the world, we are still being kind of pushed down and kind of like crushed by this. And every now and then when something kind of like sparks up, does it just make everyone else realize it's happening, you know? Rania, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I obviously agree with everyone else. I guess for me, this has played out patriarchy and racism and kind of people being afraid of queerness. I have seen it quite a lot in my work environment. As I was the only one in many cases that was not white and that was not straight, I was kind of seen as someone who is exotic, is good to have on the team. We bring something to the team that nobody else can. But I was never asked my opinion on anything. And I was kind of almost stopped from doing my job, making decisions for the firms, because I was not white, I think, and because I was not straight. And coming again from a very patriarchal, very kind of macho man background, I think it's a blessing that I wasn't born a bi man, because they would have taken that very differently. Because I'm a woman, a bi woman, it was almost like, it's okay, it's almost like a fantasy. And it was almost accepted because of that way, kind of brushed under the carpet and left there. But I think things would have been very different if I was born a man. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for all your answers to that. I know it's quite a difficult thing to talk about and discuss, and especially now there's a lot of trauma around it, but I think it's so important to make sure that people listen beyond just their own little bubbles, and actually hear stories from individual people. So thank you so much. I want to know what advice you would give out to a bisexual person to make them feel empowered. And alongside that advice, is there any like reading materials or organizations or a person or something that, you know, they could reach out to if they needed, you know, an extra push or some extra information or anything like that? So Vaneet, do you want to go first?
So I think what I would say to a young person, I mean, my experience when I was young is I didn't even know what the word bisexual was. So I'm hoping that they would be a lot better off than I am. And I would say that the whole thing is sort of a learning process. Like, you don't need to pick one label and then stick with it. You can change, you can grow, you can understand yourself better and switch. Nothing is set in stone. So remember that sexuality is fluid, and you can constantly learn more about yourself and change. So, you know, you may think you're bisexual and you may turn out that you're actually gay. You may think you're gay, you may turn out to be bisexual. It's all good. Everything is valid. In terms of sort of resources, I mean, when I was coming out, I know it's a bit of a hellscape, but I found a lot of safety in Twitter, because I found a lot of communities and a lot of people there that I can connect with, which I wouldn't have found otherwise, because like, how do you find these kind of places? I would recommend one of the groups, London by Pandas, where they're really great. So I would recommend sort of following them. Bisexual Index. You know, you can follow all the people on this panel. Get in touch if you want to talk. I mean, I'm sure most of us have our DMs open in some way. So, you know, feel free to get in touch or just at us on Twitter. And yeah, just follow people and learn from them, because a lot of us do a lot of work in these spaces, panels, writing, what have you. So yeah, read what we have to say, and that will always help.
Angie, do you want to go next?
Yes. So I would say that, you know, just kind of mirroring what Vaneet said, that you just have to learn how to accept yourself, and don't think. I think part of the joy of identifying as pansexual or bisexual is that I don't fit into any box. that I do have the freedom of announcing that like I don't have to hold on to your labels or anything like that. When I came out, actually, I thought I was lesbian at first. And so I was kind of a smart ass kid, a smarty kid. And so I would like just totally mess with my mom, and I would tell her like, oh, I'm not going to have kids until I'm 50 with my lesbian lover and in vitro fertilization. That's just, you know, like stuff that I'd heard on TV or whatever. I really didn't have any idea of what that was. But in doing that, I didn't ever really have to come out. She always thought it was a joke. And as I got older and I had, you know, partners of varying gender identities, I didn't really have to ever come out. And I guess it just came from a space within myself that I felt like I don't need a label. I don't need to identify who I am all the time. I just am. So I was very fortunate in that way, but I guess the takeaway from that is once you learn to accept who you are and you're willing to live your life freely and openly, then the rest kind of just falls in line eventually.
Rania, how about you?
Yes, so coming out for me, I think is a process that has never stopped, if that makes any sense. For me, it has been a very long process. The labels did help me quite a lot at first, because it was almost as something was falling into place. Something was like, the label was like validating my existence in a way, and was giving me that force and that drive to be myself and live my authentic truth, kind of thing. As I grew older, I kind of, I don't reject the label, but it means something personal to me. So what I would advise is take your time. There is no rush to prove to anyone anything, and kind of maybe find ways to alleviate stress, alleviate anxiety. And I think art has helped me quite a lot to do that. Painting mostly has helped me quite a lot. So that's my advice. And I would recommend, I wrote it down. So it's a coming of age book, and it's discussing fluidity and sexuality. And one of the characters is biracial and cis Muslim, so I thought that was interesting to include. And it's called The Summer of Impossibilities, and it's written by Rachel Allen, who is also a neuroscientist. Yeah, and I feel young people have a lot more access to a lot more resources nowadays than we had. And they are doing a great job. They're doing a great job accessing, asking questions, and being open, like Angie's kids, being open to kind of embracing who their parents are, who their friends are. And this is how we create a better society. So thank you, Angie, for being a fantastic mother.
Siqi, do you have anything to say as well?
I think everyone's advice was so fantastic. And like, even if I had gotten something like that just a couple years ago, like, especially with what Angie said really resonated with me, because I never felt the need to really like specifically come out either. It was more of a, I'm dating who I'm dating, that's their gender, and that's the end of the conversation, really. As queer people of color, I think it's also important to know that like it's okay if we're just like mediocre. We don't have to be the people who are educating people all the time, because it's such an emotional labor and it's not always reciprocated. I think the thing that really helped me in the last year or so was to just tell people, Google it, it's free. Look at, Vaneet mentioned the bisexual index. That's the one I always direct people to. I'm like, if you want to learn more, look at the bisexual index. Because otherwise, I think your days are filled with people being like, oh, what are bi people like? Well, how do you know if you're bi? That's literally on the homepage of the bisexual index. How do you know if you're bi? And I think it's just we're allowed to take a break and not be advocates 24/7. So I think that's really important.
100%. I 100% agree with you there. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Oh, my voice went. It's like I got emotional. Thank you, everyone, so much for doing this panel and it was so nice to talk to you all and get to know all of you. And I think all of the things that we've talked about is going to be so important for people out there to listen to and to hear and to feel kind of validated as well, as people of color. So thank you so much. And I'll see you guys soon, hopefully. I'm going to follow you all. Thank you so much.
Text on a pink and blue gradient background, by Pride UK's Bi-Fi Festival. An animated Wi-Fi symbol beams above the logo.